Have you ever had the feeling that someone could see straight through you? Not in a way that scared you, but in a way that woke something up that you thought was gone? Like suddenly, without warning, you weren't just background noise in your own life anymore. I didn't go looking for that. I didn't roll out of bed one morning and decide to crave what I had no right to crave. I didn't ask for my heart to lean in the wrong direction. Life doesn't check in with you first. It doesn't ask, is this okay? It just slides in quietly, slowly, almost politely, until one day you realize the ground underneath you isn't the same place you started. For me, it began with a look, just one, harmless. If you asked anyone else in the room, a couple of seconds maybe. But those few seconds hung in the air a little too long. And the worst part, I didn't turn away. I let it sit there. I let it land. When you've spent years feeling like wallpaper, always there, rarely noticed, being seen feels less like temptation and more like oxygen. My husband hadn't really touched me what felt like forever. Not in the way that said, I want you. Not in the way that said, I see you, I remember you. He kissed the kids goodnight every evening. He tapped their foreheads, tucked in their blankets, and then collapsed into bed beside me, turned his back to me, screen in his hand, head in some other world. He'd fall asleep fast. I'd lie there staring into the dark, wondering exactly when I faded out of focus, when I became part of the furniture instead of his partner. So when someone else finally looked at me like I still existed, as more than a mother, more than a schedule, more than a list of tasks, I didn't push that moment away. I let it breathe. At first, he didn't say anything. No big speeches, no obvious flirting, but silence can say more than words when you know how to listen. The way his eyes lingered when I changed my hair, the way he noticed when I put on a different dress, the way his expression softened when I laughed too loud at something silly. He saw the tiny things, and I saw him seeing them. That's where it truly started, not with fingers brushing, not with lips touching. Just that quiet, aching awareness that someone was paying attention to the parts of me I thought had faded out years ago. I told myself it was nothing. I told myself, I'm just flattered, I'm starved for attention, that's all. I promised myself I would never, ever cross a line. But some lines don't snap with a dramatic sound. They smudge, they fade, they blur until you can't quite tell where safe ends and dangerous begins. He never reached for me. He never asked to kiss me. He only ever asked without really asking to be allowed to see me, to watch the way I moved, the way I smiled, the way I tried to swallow my own sadness without making a sound. And what broke me wide open was realizing I wanted that. I wanted to be looked at, not like an object, not like a fantasy, but like a person who mattered. They say the most powerful desires are the ones you never say out loud. Mine started in silence. His started with a single steady glance. I acted like I didn't notice. I played my part, the polite wife, the loyal friend, the woman who laughs a second too late so nobody suspects she's secretly trying not to feel anything at all. But deep inside, I wanted exactly what he was offering, not a body pressed to mine, but eyes that refused to look away. Curiosity turned into anticipation, and anticipation turned into this slow, steady unraveling I thought I could manage. I kept telling myself, I'm in control. I know where the limits are, but control is a funny thing. You think you have it, until that one moment when you suddenly realize it slipped away 3 moments ago, and you never even saw it go. That's how I ended up here, telling you this. Not because I'm looking for forgiveness, not because I need excuses, but because stories like this don't usually get told out loud. They live in the quiet corners of marriage beds. They live in houses where nobody fights, but nobody really talks either. They live in hearts that look perfectly fine from the outside and are starving to death on the inside. So if anything in what I've said feels uncomfortably familiar, if there's a little voice inside whispering, I know this feeling, then stay here with me for a while, because this isn't just some dramatic story. It's a memory I never thought I'd share with anyone. I'm in my mid-30s, 2 kids, a house that is never fully clean and never fully a mess, a life that looks okay on paper, a heart that's been running on half battery for years. My husband and I used to be different. He used to hug me like I was the one steady thing in his life. He used to call me his calm in the storm. He'd text me during the day just to say something stupid, just to make me smile. Now he scrolls and scrolls, phone in one hand, silence in the other. We share a last name, we share a mortgage, we share a bed, but sometimes it feels like we're just 2 tenants sharing space and trying not to bump into each other too much. I ask how his day was. He shrugs, says busy. I ask if he's okay. He says yeah. He asks me if we're out of toothpaste or if I paid the internet bill. That's as deep as it goes these days. Surface level, functional, efficient, I kept telling myself, this is normal, people change, passion fades, kids are exhausting, life gets loud, this is what marriage becomes. But under all that pretending, something in me was hungry, not for drama, not for who I've turned into, exhausted, practical, half present, but for the girl I used to be before responsibilities layered themselves over my skin, for the person I still want to be. It's important you understand this. It didn't start with some reckless decision or wild temptation. It started with two people quietly wondering what it might feel like to be wanted again. There was a weekend get-together not long after that, nothing dramatic, just neighbors, a few close friends, kids racing through the backyard with sticky hands and squeals that made the whole block sound alive. I threw on a loose dress, hair up, no makeup, comfortable, forgettable, the kind of outfit you wear when your priority is not to stand out, but just to survive the day. When he walked in, carrying a bag of snacks and an easy smile, his eyes slid over the chaos and landed right on me, and something in his gaze flickered, just for a split second, like he saw more than my stained shirt and bare face. Throughout the afternoon, he helped at the grill, made the kids laugh, pulled stories out of people who usually stayed quiet. He was warm, relaxed, making everyone else comfortable, and I kept trying to convince myself I was imagining everything. The way his eyes stayed on me half a beat too long, the way his voice dropped a little softened around my name, the way he commented on things my husband stopped noticing a long time ago, how often I rubbed the back of my neck when I was tired, how I shifted from foot to foot when I felt ignored. As the sun started melting into the horizon and people left in little waves, I began stacking plates, collecting cups. The kids yawned their way indoors. My husband disappeared into the den with one sentence about checking something. I already knew I wouldn't see his face again until bedtime, and then it was just me and the friend in the kitchen. He offered to help clean up, said it casually, like he always did, like it was nothing. "I'll stay a bit," he said. "You look wiped. Let me help." I should have said no, should have done the polite thing, the safe thing, smiled, thanked him, told him I had it under control. Instead, I nodded. We moved around each other in this quiet rhythm, dishes clinking, dishwasher humming, the low sound of the TV 2 rooms over, everything unspoken hanging between us like steam. He stood close enough that I could feel the heat of his body, even though we weren't touching, not even an accidental brush. I dropped a spoon. We both reached for it at the same time, fingers almost touching. Almost when we straightened, our eyes met. He didn't say a single word. He didn't need to. And that look was a question I'd been too afraid to ask myself out loud. "You feel this too, don't you?" My heart stuttered. I pulled my gaze away, turned to the sink, turned on the water. My hands shook as I rinsed. Another plate, pretending everything was normal, pretending I didn't understand. He stayed nearby, wiping crumbs off the counter, asking about my daughter's school, complimenting the food, making ordinary small talk with a tone that felt anything but ordinary. It felt like he was searching for a secret door and wondering if I'd let him open it. When I set the final plate on the rack, I could feel his eyes on my back. I turned around, and there it was. That same charged quiet, not awkward, not forced, just heavy, alive. My chest felt too small for my heartbeat. My throat felt tight, not from fear, but from the pressure of holding myself in place. I told myself, it's nothing. He's just being nice. You're just tired. You're reading into this, but I knew better. Something had shifted. And even if we never spoke about it, even if we never acted on it, both of us knew. He said goodnight softly, didn't reach for my hand, didn't lean closer, just looked at me one more time and left. I closed the door behind him and kept my hand on the knob, as if the wood between us might suddenly dissolve and I'd have to decide again whether to let him in or not. That night I slipped into bed beside my husband. He didn't say anything more than a half-mumbled night. Didn't turn toward me, didn't notice the way my breathing was too quick for someone who had been standing still. I stared at the ceiling in the dark, replaying every second, the look, the distance that didn't feel like distance, a spark I tried so hard to deny. I knew in that exact moment that something inside me had crossed a line, even if my body hadn't moved an inch. Sleep never really came. When morning crawled in, my body was heavy with exhaustion, but my mind was too alert, filled with noise I couldn't shut off. I showered longer than I needed, watched the water run over my skin like it might rinse away the tension coiled beneath it. I caught my own reflection and just stared. For the first time in a long time, I wanted to feel pretty, alive, something other than tired. I reached into the back of my closet and pulled out a dress I hadn't worn in years. It wasn't revealing. It wasn't dramatic. It was just me, the old me, the one who used to care what she looked like for herself, not just for practicality. I put it on, brushed my hair properly, swiped on a little color on my lips, nothing intense, just enough to feel like I'd tried. I walked into the kitchen, nervous and hopeful in a way that made me feel ridiculous. My husband sat at the table, hunched over his phone, one hand absent-mindedly circling his coffee mug. "Morning," he murmured, barely glancing up. I waited. I hovered near the counter, pretending to wipe a crumb that wasn't there, silently begging for one small reaction. A second look, a compliment, a smile, anything, nothing came. He finished his coffee, put the mug in the sink, grabbed his keys, and walked out the door with a quick, "I'll be home late" meeting. I stood there in my pretty dress and my hopeful lips, feeling like someone had switched me to mute. Then my phone buzzed. It was a message from him, the friend. "You looked beautiful yesterday," it read. "I hope you know that." That stupid little line stole the air from my lungs, not because of the word beautiful, but because someone noticed, someone was paying attention, even when the person who promised to didn't anymore. That was the first crack of thunder before everything inside me turned into a storm. I started putting in effort again, but it wasn't for my husband. I tried to convince myself it was. I told myself, maybe he'll finally notice. Maybe this will pull him back. But deep down, I knew who I was really hoping would look up. I'd catch myself spritzing perfume before a barbecue, smoothing my hair before answering the door, choosing clothes that made me feel interesting, not just practical. And every time I whispered the same lie, "It's harmless. Attention doesn't count as anything. You're not doing anything wrong. You just want to feel like a woman again." There was a part of me that still wanted my husband to wake up, to see what was happening, to say, "Hey, what's going on with you?" Maybe if he had, I could have slammed the brakes and said, "See, this was all just a cry for your attention. I can stop now. I just needed you to look at me." But he didn't. He noticed when we were out of peanut butter. He noticed when the trash wasn't taken out. He noticed the electric bill and the car payment and the broken remote. He didn't notice me, and the more invisible I felt standing next to my husband, the more alive I felt whenever that friend walked into a room. Still, it wasn't physical, not yet. But I began to crave small things more than I'd ever craved anything big. The sound of his knock on the door, the way his voice sounded when he said my name, the slight curve of his smile when our eyes met across the lawn. I laughed more when he was around, stood a little taller, found my hand drifting to my collarbone when I spoke, as if I were suddenly aware of my own body again. And every single time I caught him looking at me with that quiet intensity, a part of me burned with shame, because I knew exactly what I was doing. I was building a whole secret world in my chest, a world where he saw me, where I felt wanted, where I got to be someone, more than mom and wife and household manager. My husband didn't live in that world. He didn't even know it existed. But as long as nothing physically happened, I told myself I was still on the right side of everything, still a good person, still faithful, still safe. That's the story we like to repeat to ourselves, isn't it? That it only counts when bodies touch, that anything that happens in your imagination doesn't matter. But that's not true. The line had already been crossed, just not where anyone else could see it. It was my idea of the movie night. "Let's have a cozy night in," I texted a few people. "Kids' movie, snacks, nothing fancy." He was the only one who answered. "Sounds good, I'll bring popcorn," he wrote. I told myself it was no big deal. My husband would be there, the kids would be there, lights off, movie on, no room for anything too intense. When he arrived, the air in the room shifted in a way I pretended not to notice. He handed over the snacks, joked with the kids, greeted my husband. Everything looked normal from the outside. The kids picked something animated and silly. We dimmed the lights. Everyone found a spot. My husband claimed the armchair, lit only by the glow of his phone and the TV. He barely watched the movie. His thumb never stopped moving. I sat at one edge of the couch, the friends sat at the other, the kids settled between us, all knees and elbows and excitement, passing the popcorn bowl back and forth. On the surface, it was just a regular family evening. Underneath, it felt like the ground was tilted. I couldn't focus on the movie. I knew he was there, too aware. Not because we were touching, we weren't. There was a cushion, a child, a whole row of space between us. But his presence filled every gap in my attention. At one point, the kids leaned forward, laughing at something on the screen. That's when he looked over at me. Just a glance, just a second, but it felt like time paused. My chest tightened. I forced myself to look away first, terrified that if I didn't, I might never look away at all. Eventually, the movie ended. The kids drooped against the couch, sleepy and heavy, smelling like butter and sugar and childhood. My husband stood up, mumbled something about an email he needed to send, and slipped out of the room without saying good night to any of us. The credits rolled. The room dimmed into that soft, late-night quiet, and suddenly it was just him and me, and the soft breathing of two half-asleep kids. We didn't speak, we didn't smile. We just sat there in the dark, listening to the soft hiss of the TV as it flipped from screensaver to silence. My hand brushed against the blanket on my lap, and I gripped it tightly like it was the only thing tethering me to the right. side of a decision. Inside, everything in me was a storm. Wanting, afraid, confused, awake. He was the first one to break the silence. His voice was low, almost swallowed by the darkness. "I wasn't watching the movie," he whispered. I froze. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. My silence was its own confession. I stood up too quickly, gathering bowls and cups, hiding behind movement. The kids shuffled off toward their rooms, rubbing their eyes. He followed me to the kitchen the way he always did after gatherings, but nothing felt routine anymore. He leaned against the counter, watching me rinse a bowl, and there was something in his eyes that made my skin feel too tight. He didn't reach out, didn't step closer, didn't say anything else. He just looked at me in a way that said every word we didn't dare speak out loud. I should have told him to leave. I should have drawn a line with my voice, not just in my mind, but I didn't, because in that muted moment, something passed between us. It wasn't touch. It wasn't a kiss. It wasn't a promise. It was agreement, the unspoken kind. We both knew this wasn't one-sided, that whatever this was, this charged, fragile thing, it wasn't just my imagination. He left a few minutes later. No long goodbye, no dramatic exit. The house stayed the same, but I didn't. I locked the front door behind him, fingers lingering on the cool metal, and this time I knew exactly why, because I wasn't sure I trusted myself if he ever knocked again. Deep inside, beneath the fear and shame, there was this small, shaking part of me that hoped he would. It was late that night when the house finally went still. The kids were asleep. My husband was snoring softly, one arm thrown across his side of the bed like a barrier I didn't dare cross. I couldn't sleep. I walked back into the kitchen barefoot, holding a mug of tea I didn't really want. The clock hummed on the wall. The refrigerator clicked on and off, the kind of quiet that makes you feel like even your thoughts are too loud. Then came a knock, soft. 3 gentle taps. Hesitant. My heart jumped into my throat. I knew who it was before I opened the door. He stood there on the porch, hands in his pockets, shoulders tense, eyes unsure. The porch light carved shadows under his eyes, made him look tired and younger at the same time. We didn't pretend this was casual. We didn't make excuses about forgetting something or needing to ask a quick question. I just stepped aside. He walked in. We moved to the kitchen table like it was the only place big enough for everything we weren't saying. He sat down. I stayed standing for a second, then sank into the chair across from him. The silence between us wasn't empty. It was full, too full. He looked at his hands for a long time, then finally spoke. "You haven't been happy," he said, not as a question, as a fact. I stared down at my chipped nail polish, at the tiny tear in the hem of my pajama pants, at the faint coffee ring on the table from earlier that morning. "I'm just tired," I said. The words came out small, brittle. It wasn't a lie, but it wasn't the whole truth either. He nodded like he'd expected that answer. Then, after a long pause, his voice dropped to a whisper I almost didn't catch. "I don't want to do anything," he said quietly. "I just want to see it." I looked up slowly, confused and terrified. "See what?" I asked. He met my eyes without flinching. "You," he said, "as you really are, without hiding, without pretending you're okay all the time." He didn't say it like a man trying to seduce a married woman. He didn't say it like a fantasy. He said it like a prayer, and something inside me cracked. So hard I almost heard it, because nobody had asked for that in years. Not "you look hot," not "you're sexy," not "I want your body." Just "I want to see you, the real you, the one underneath all the layers of duty and exhaustion." I felt stripped without him even touching me, like someone had peeled away the outer layer I'd been showing the world and was staring straight at the tired woman underneath, the one who cried in the shower and wiped her eyes before anyone could see. "You shouldn't say things like that," I whispered. "I know," he replied, "but not saying them hasn't made them go away." We sat there with our hands braced on opposite sides of the table. No reaching, no under-the-table brush of fingers, no stolen kiss. But what we gave each other in that moment was something worse than a physical mistake. We gave each other permission to feel what we were feeling, permission to stop pretending we didn't, and that right there was the real betrayal. Because when someone truly sees you, you can't squeeze yourself back into invisibility without something inside you tearing. The next morning, I moved through the house like I was trying not to disturb the air. I poured cereal, I packed lunches, I folded laundry that I swear I didn't remember washing. I double-checked homework and signed permission slips. I didn't look in the mirror. I avoided my own eyes as if I were a stranger I wasn't ready to meet yet. I didn't text him. He didn't text me. When we passed each other later that week in the school parking lot, we exchanged polite nods. Just 2 familiar adults making sure kids didn't run into traffic. Nothing more. He stopped coming by the house, stopped dropping off extra tomatoes from his garden, stopped lingering near the gate when my husband wasn't home. He didn't vanish dramatically. He just faded out, the way a song does when someone slowly turns down the volume. But he left something behind, a shadow, an imprint, a ghost version of a life I never actually lived, but came close enough to tasting that I can't forget how it might have felt. My marriage didn't explode. There were no screaming matches, no slam doors, no suitcases by the front door. From the outside, everything looked intact. Dinner still happened. Bills still got paid. The kids still made crafts at the table and fought over who got the bigger slice of cake. But something in me had cracked right down the middle, and no one noticed. That hurt more than anything else. Not the longing, not the almost betrayal, the fact that I was quietly falling apart in the middle of my own life, and nobody thought to ask why my smile looked like it was held together with tape. My husband didn't suddenly become someone else. He stayed himself, distant but reliable, present but detached, still on his phone every night, still asking practical questions and forgetting emotional ones.